Okay, here is my 12-inch US vintage collection. I try to get good examples of most of the different eras. The figures up here, are, up to here for Britain. And here, these are the Space Explorers. The Space Explorer, the US Space Explorer is the one on the left. These are the two variations that were available with Action Man. As you notice, they have the nice, the bright orange with them. It's a very, very noticeable difference from the US version. Here are some of the 70s Adventure Team. Many of the sets on the two bottom shelves came with comics, and you may be able to see there's a comic behind each one of them. I was hoping to be able to display them so that the comic would show up a lot better than it does, but they were too crowded. It wasn't possible. But that was my hope. I really wanted to see those comics. Okay, these figures here are from the 60s. These are some of the originals. The original Combat Army, of course the nurse, and then you have the cadets. Here's the cadet from West Point. There's from Annapolis, and there should be a midshipman somewhere. Where is he? There he is. There's the midshipman. And then you can really tell the difference between the painted heads from the 60s and the flocked head figures from the 70s. And these are some of the very later sets. It's been a while since I have messed with these, and it's actually kind of exciting for me to see them because I've almost forgot what was there. I've had this covered up with a white sheet as I photograph the 3 3/4 inch for the book that I'm working on. And I put these sets together a few years ago, and once I covered it up, I guess they've been actually behind a sheet for 2 years, and so it's like I get to say hello. It's kind of nice. I really fell in love with these figures when I was working on the 12-inch vintage. It was one of my favorite collecting times of all. I was just blown away by the quality of them. They're very, very different than the modern figures, than today's super articulated, really, really well done figures. But for the time, there's something about just holding one in your hand, the weight of it, the quality of it, that just is really, really inspirational. Here is a wardrobe that houses most of the rest of my vintage figures. These particular figures are from France. France are in the top 2 shelves, and from Germany, the bottom 2 shelves. And both France, with G.I.JOE, and Germany by Schildkraut, made some really interesting innovations to the outfits that Joes wore. Of course, one of the neat things they did was design uniforms that were sort of specific for their country. For instance, here's a French Republican Guard, and here are the gendarmes also from France, obviously. Okay, this figure here is an Israeli figure made for the French market. Here's an Africa Corps figure. They did their Captain Cosmos. Can you see Captain Cosmos there? Was their version of the Space Force, very much like the Palatoy figures from the UK. Then down here, the German figures. These are German border guards. They had a West Point figure as well as Annapolis and the Air Force Academy. And then most of their military uniforms, in order to market them in the UK, they had to put them under the umbrella of the UN. So if it's specifically a military uniform, they'll have a UN band and often a UN cap to denote it as for the United Nations. And then there's a hunter figure that's a hunter, not an adventure hunter, but a regular hunter. This is my another one of my closets where I keep vintage items, a vintage 12-inch and the Super Joe at 7-inch. Although the Super Joe items also across the world had other names in some cases. So there are a few modern items in here as well. Maybe of interest to the vintage 3 3/4 inch collector. Okay, a DeSimone 12-inch. These are DeSimone 12-inch convention items. But then you also have the 12-inch Lady J, which is actually she was based on the same body as Natalie, and Natalie is one of the figures from this the 2010 collection that was made into a 3 3/4 inch figure. So she even still has, I mean, the arms, they kept the same gloves. Those were Natalie's gloves. They kept them for Lady J. They also have the Gung Ho convention figure. It's done with a Hall of Fame body, of course. I have these loose out in the garage. We'll look at those a little while later. These are the 12-inch figures made in Brazil for Comando Masao. These are also based loosely on the Hall of Fame line of figures, but done for the Brazilian market. So it says G.I.JOE Falcon on what would have been the Storm Shadow. This is their Inimigo Cobra. This is a Destro figure. There he is boxed. There's the Dragão Negro boxed. And then they had an Ace figure that they had as their pilot. And then this is essentially would be a grunt figure, Soldado. And then they changed their box, and then this is the same figure as Destro, but recolored for it's just called the Enemy. And then this is the Ace recolored, and then this is the Grunt recolored. And then here you have some of the 7-inch Super Joe figures, but you also have some of the incarnations of 7-inch Joe body types that were released in France and in Italy, and also in Mexico. I'll give you a good example of the difference between a Mexican one. Sorry to have my back to you. My Mexican one and a U.S. version. You see the color difference. It's not just the color difference, however. One of the most remarkable things about the Mexican line of these figures is that all of the U.S. ones, the hands, and the European ones as well, the hands were made out of a soft rubber that I guess every last one that I've seen has disintegrated. Even the ones in the package have already disintegrated. But all the ones that I found in Mexico still have intact hands. Why? Because they use plastic instead of rubber. And then you have, okay, this is Tescuda Joe. This is again, it's sort of like the Combat Joe, in between vintage and modern, mid 80s. And then these are more items from the Super Joe line. In England, they were sold under the title Commander Power rather than Super Joe. And then here's one from Mexico, and that's how they were sold by Lily Letty under I guess Siglo Century 30 is 3000. 3 X's, I don't know. It's just a play set for Comando Masao. And in here, these are more Combat Joe items from Japan. Oh, this is stuff from Mexico. Aventurero de Acción instead of G.I. Joe on the rubber wrap, and on many of the other pieces that go with them, of course. Another item is the Godzilla costume Joe. You could get him in 2 ways. You could get just the costume, and the box looks like this with no picture on the front. Or you could get it with the figure. And if you get it with the figure, the box is exactly the same, except for there's a sticker on the front with a picture of the actual costume and the figure. Well, I won't put it on now, but then normally his head, actually you're supposed to take the head off, pop the head off, and put this on. I like having him peer out of there. And then his hands, the hands of the Joe, of course, pop out, and you just pop the Godzilla hands right back in. And then the way you put him in is you take this off, and there's a zipper in the back where you put the figure. The figure that actually goes with this I have in one of my display boxes. Some people think that the Takara Godzilla is this one here. And this is their much later series. It says Medicom, which came out of Takara. It's the Real Action Hero series. It's a much cheaper version of Godzilla. Here are the two together. Okay, it's really soft rubber. So this is the Combat Joe, and then this is the Medicom. We're now in my garage, in one part of the garage where I keep a bunch of extra pieces that some of them are 12-inch, and some of them are vintage 12-inch, and some of them are 3 3/4 inch extras. So as you come down here, you can see here's the Devil of the Deep, Abominable Snowman, other vintage items. I'm not going to bother taking these out. These, on this side, these are all 12-inch boxed items from different countries. This says UK, some Australia, UK, this is Japan, US, Argentina. Here's the Intruder from Britain, and other Action Man items. Again, all sorts of vintage accessories, vintage packs, Mission Sabotage. Oh, actually that says Patrouille. That should be in the French one. I don't know why it's here. Well, it's made. Okay, here's another one. Mountain Rescue. And here you have Space Guys. Again, just a variety of different sets from vintage Japan, including Cyborg. This is an interesting thing. Schildkraut from Germany exported their figures to Canada under the name G.I. Joe, and there's some really, really nice pieces to pick up. Here are some other U.S. items. The Defenders is Hasbro's own knockoff line of itself. Here's Atomic Man. Here's an Eagle Eyes Man of Action. Be careful with that. I spent a long time looking for Argentina items. Some of them are really, really hard to find. This is the way the sets come from Argentina. You buy the figure separately and then the sets like that. And it says Joe Super Temerario, which means Courageous Super Joe. So here's items from Spain. Here's the MP set. Here's an underwater set. Mountain climbing. There's Saboteur set. Down there's the set for jungle fighting. Try to be gentle with these. The medic set. The backpack helicopter. This is Italy, and in Italy they have the same name as in Germany, which is Action Team, but they actually have two names, Action Team G.I. Joe, whereas in Germany they only use the Action Team logo. And so here's the Canadian Mounted Police, here's the Indian, here's the Mountain and Arctic, and they had several different ways of marketing their figures. There was this version, and then there was the box version like this that opens up. And well, in this case it's just the helicopter, but very often it's a whole outfit. So this is France. And this is not as full as I thought it was, which means I have extra room to put things. So they went by the name Group Action Joe, and they even put it on their Group Action Joe on there, for instance, on this backpack. Here's this. If you can look in here, so I don't have to pick it up. Here's the space set, and then here is that's the oh, I can't remember the name. It's the pilot set with the parachute. And here is a this is the it's the motorcycle set. There's just a bunch of them. Okay, this is another Indian one. Just some more sets from Argentina, very much like the ones we saw earlier. And this is more Argentina. I worked hard finding these Argentina sets. I was on the internet on Mercado Libre looking for Argent 7 and other Argentina pieces, the vehicles, and every time I came across one of these, I'd get them because they were pretty rare. This is Italy again. So here's one of those boxes. I probably may open it up. See, there's the entire set inside the box. And also, I know I forgot to mention, one of the cool things about these box sets is they had a comic, a cartoon comic with each one of them, and they told a little story of the adventure, so that gave kids some sort of a basis from which to build a storyline if they wanted it.